And I think
that, can we stop there for a second? I think that was the most up thing in sports media this year. How
and stepping in is Williams to slam it home.
The Chicago Bulls select Jay Williams from Duke University.
And by the way, let me tell you this. You just talked about a collection of individuals. We're talking about Team Stephen A.
Look, Kobe Bryant has just passed away in a helicopter accident. I don't know what I'm gonna say on TV. All of a sudden being thrusted on camera. Tell the world what Kobe means to you in 2 minutes. What the
Yeah.
How am I supposed to do that?
It's impossible. A former NBA owner, he said if LeBron James came to me and said, I need $20 billion to start the live golf version of the NBA tomorrow, I would have it within 24 hours.
Not even a question. And this is what happens when you're in media. I'm about to say something that I know is gonna go viral. So.
All right, thank you so much for doing this.
Come on, man, it's my pleasure.
I appreciate it, man. We got a lot to talk about. All-American, NBA, businessman, entrepreneur.
You're from Jersey?
I'm from Jersey, you're from Jersey. You lived in Miami, I lived in Miami.
You're in North Carolina, I was in North Carolina.
I was and am still a Duke fan.
Okay.
So this is awesome for me, man. This is great.
Awesome, man.
Let's start with, I just like personally have a question about your life right now.
Okay.
What the hell is a day in the life? Because I feel like you're on TV at, on radio at 6, on TV at 6, it goes till 10. You got a lot going on. What does a day in the life of Jay Williams look like?
I wake up every day around 2:30, 2:45. I get caught up with what happened the night before, depending upon whether I stayed up to watch a game or not. I'm typically out of my house around 3:45.
How does that look? Are those like notes someone prepares for you, or you're just online, Twitter, whatever?
So a combination of both. So
Yeah.
I decide, I really believe outsourcing as much as possible to make my life as easy as possible. So throughout randomly scrolling online and getting people's resumes, I found an individual that literally helps me with every single game and notes from beat writers and things before that happened the night before.
Amazing.
So almost like I get like a memorandum that gets delivered to me in the morning first thing that I get a chance to go over. All right, here are the 7 NBA games, here are the 2 NFL games that occurred. And I try to stay up and watch as much as possible, but realistically,
You can't watch 12 games.
yeah,
Right?
and
It's
by
like-
9:30, I have 3 kids under 4. Like I'm starting to fade,
Yeah.
So I go over that, and then I start actually formulating my own opinions because on my car ride in, I watch a lot of games. I go through YouTube highlights, unless I didn't watch the games the night before, and I start, okay, here's what other people in the marketplace said. Do I agree? Do I not agree? And also, like, how does my opinion that I formed earlier in the year, if there's a red thread that you can carry throughout the course of the season, is it either, inductive, like towards that red thread commentary, or is it reductive, below, and really make my opinion based off that. So literally I do that. I get to the studio around 5:15. I prepare to do our show from 6 to 10, which is Keyshawn, J. Will, and Max. And then either
That feels long, by the way.
a 4-hour live
Yeah.
radio / simulcast show. Yeah.
I've done like 2-hour stuff before, and you're tired.
And you know what's really funny about that
Yeah.
though? Like people say to me, well, you're reading off a script. I'm like, I'm not reading off any teleprompter, any script. It's all off the top of my head. And a lot of times you have to deal with random topics that in today's cancel culture can really make people feel uncomfortable.
Yep.
So, and you're not informed about everything that you're expounding upon either. So talking intellectually around subject matter or being informed or having the grace, honestly, to bow out of conversations when, look, this is not.
Well, I don't say that it feels long from a viewership perspective. I say that it feels long for you for that exact reason, which is 4 hours is a lot of content, right? There's no way, or it's very difficult at least, for one individual to be able to talk for 4 hours every single day about a topic that they're certain about, right? Very different topics. So I imagine that's probably a difficult part about it.
Are you trying to cut through?
Yeah.
Or are you trying to give an informed opinion?
Yeah.
Informed opinions don't always cut through. Polarizing opinions cut through.
Yeah.
So for me, over the last 10 years, how do you formulate polarizing, informed opinions that are polarizing because they are realistic, right? Like we have so many extremes that for me, I'm like, okay, I found an avenue that can cut through by just being realistic.
Yeah.
So when somebody says, Kyrie is the worst teammate. And I'm like, well, hold on. There are 6 or 7 other NBA players have decided not to get vaccinated, but it's only that the city of New York has mandated that now we're going to make Kyrie Irving the face of all unvaccinated people. that's unfair.
Yeah.
We should have the same level of scrutiny if you are going to criticize Kyrie as Bradley Beal and other players who have decided, Jonathan Isaac, who have decided not to be vaccinated. But different strokes for different folks. So I found a way to cut through in that capacity. So do a 4-hour show. 4 one-hour shows is how we like to kind of categorize it in the TV industry. Then turn around and try to get myself prepared for the big show, which is Stephen A. Smith, which is debating that on First Take. And what
are the differences between those two, right? Because I asked for one specific reason. When I look at TV today, I imagine it's probably pretty difficult to only get, call it 20 to 30 seconds to get your point across, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like that's a common theme, right? Maybe you have a little bit more time on the radio side because it's a longer show and it's an open discussion. But when you're physically debating someone back and forth like that, you have 20, 30 seconds, producers probably in your ear saying, Stephen A's up next. Have you struggled with that? Is that difficult?
No, because I think I have more of a TV background than a radio background.
Yeah.
Radio allows you to expound
Yeah.
and actually articulate the details of, here's my thesis and now let me tell you why. But it's almost like when you do debate format, you don't lead with just regular dialogue. You lead with a headline. Like what allows you, as you're scrolling through IG, what stops you to read something? A headline.
There's no fluff allowed to start it.
So it's like, and this is the way they teach you. It's like lead with your headline, your thesis, and then now explain why you have that thesis. So your ability to be quick, your ability to be efficient matters. But you also learn how to navigate, right? Stephen A. is great at this. If you ever pay attention to what he says, sometimes he says the same thing in different ways 2 or 3 times, right? Because you do have to eat up clock. Somebody does have to carry the show, especially when it's their show. So you also learn the skills of debating, the skills of, okay, writing down what somebody actually says. Does this fit into their thesis? Finding counterpoints against their thesis that if you believe something differently. So it's almost like a new level of your brain that you reach other than doing sports talk radio that feels like we are boys kicking it on our couch, just shooting the shit.
What sets him apart, Stephen A. specifically? Right, and I ask that not necessarily that I or anyone else thinks he's the best of the best, but he's obviously done an incredible job. Everyone can look up his salary, right? I think it's probably public at this point. He's built an incredible resume for himself and all of this stuff. Is there anything that you've seen from him personally that just you're like, that makes sense?
His relentless attack. He's always on.
Yeah.
And never stops. And he is an entertainer, man.
Yeah.
It's almost what you saw with Shannon Sharpe sitting courtside at the Lakers game when he got into the beef with Dylan Brooks, right?
Yeah.
Like, to me, I'm watching that saying, damn, that reminds me of WWE.
Yeah.
Like, that's wrestling, right? Yeah. There is an element
Everything's WWE.
Yes. So, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me tell you something. As I look at the camera, right? Like, think about that. Think about if you say, I'm like, what are you talking about? Let me tell you. Yeah. That's way different. What?
It's different than sitting on your couch, posted up with a mic and.
But it's different in just the level of engagement. So if we're talking on First Take, and I say, what are you talking about? That is way different than, what?
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. Like, that display of addressing the camera, that gets your attention from an audience perspective. Now, and then if I lead with a strong argument, and if I keep talking, as a producer, if you are Jay 2 minutes, Jay 1 minute, and then you get the ball back, you have to make a counterpoint in 45 seconds, which is not easy to do.
Yeah.
Right? That he's really good at doing. So I think it's the trick of the trade, learning how to make points, get in, get out, while also, hey, I want to hold on to the rock for a second. Let me show you why.
Yeah. Have you, how has it been as a former player, right? I think about this a lot because there's a difference between someone who has never played sports at a very high level, like professional level, doing this. And there's a difference between someone that has and is friends with a lot of players, right? Say you retire today, you start ESPN tomorrow. Is it difficult to say negative things? Is it difficult to talk about people you played with, you're friends with, etc.? How do you feel about that kind of component to the job?
So I would kind of come back to you with another question. What am I trying to achieve? Yeah. So am I trying to be the loudest person in the room? Am I trying to give the athlete POV? Am I trying to become part of what the media news cycle really is? How am I cutting through? Right? I think it all starts with how you want to cut through. For me, frankly, kicking off doing media, doing college basketball for 6 or 7 years, I was trying to be the next Dick Vitale.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, there's only one Dick Vitale. Then you say Jay Billis. I'm like, all right, he has more of a legal background. And I think over the years, I've learned that, okay, like I am a young black male. I've had different experiences than you, right? I need to lean into that. That doesn't make it bad that I have different experiences. It just gives me a different POV that I can explain. I am also pro player. You know, so much of media is about criticizing players, but we criticize NBA, NFL players more so than we criticize our politicians.
Yeah.
Which is shameful to me.
Yeah.
But that is the vortex that we live in. So when you take the counterproductive kind of, well, I guess according to media, the counter to that, and you say, well, here's it from the athlete perspective. Like something we dealt with today, AJ Brown. They just beat up on the Giants. Divisional round championship,
That's
right?
my team.
That's my team too. Hurt me too, right? Love Saquon,
Yeah.
love Danny Dimes, but they beat up on him. And then AJ Brown, you know, talked about a moment where Nick Sirianni literally put his hand on him on the sideline while they're up 31-7. And then he felt the need to come out with a comment saying, I'm not a diva wide receiver. I just want the ball, blah, blah. And everybody's like, well, I told you this athlete's thinking about himself. I'm like, first off, every athlete thinks about themselves. Like I've been in games where we won the game by 20. I'm like, damn, I shot 7 of 28 from the field. Like, I need to be better.
You can still be happy.
Yes, I can be pissed off with my performance or my lack thereof production, while also still celebrating in the fact that our team won the game.
Yep.
I'm a competitive dude. By the way, those are the same habits that got me to the highest level that allowed me to be one of the best wide receivers in the game of football.
Yeah.
So, you know, those two can go together, can blend together, and helping people understand that and providing a perspective on that, I think is important, because otherwise, if you didn't play the sport, you would label him as a diva that only cares about himself. I'm like, that's not actually true.
Yeah, I think that role is very important, actually, right? I think providing an example of what an athlete's mindset might be in those situations is probably doesn't get enough credit. The other thing I would ask is the state of media today, right? I think over the last, people call it new media, whatever they want to call it, right? But
what is new media?
I frame new media as people talking shit.
Okay. All right.
But it's not really, right? New media is like, Draymond's going to have a podcast. And now he goes back to the hotel room after game 6 in Boston, whatever game it was, and gets on the mic, says, I played like shit, we could do this better, whatever, right?
Or Bob Myers, the GM of their team, having his own podcast now.
Right, yeah. So like, you hear directly from them rather than a reporter asking a question, printing the part that they want, etc. So I think that's probably part of it. What is your, like, if you just zoom out for a minute and you look at the landscape of media today, new stuff, old stuff, stuff in between, like, what do you take of all this? Is it good that we have more voices in the scenario now? Is it not good? Like, just how do you think about media?
So I think if we're framing new media from the athlete first perspective,
what do you think about new media?
I love that.
No, but what's your definition of it?
See, I think there could be, for me, I try to come at things from a level of empathy.
Yeah.
Right, an informed perspective, an objective perspective. Like, I think we have lost the ability to hear people who are objective and how they actually look at it. Because I even see from our network and other networks that the more objective you are and you can be so reasonable in your response, that's not the stuff that gets pushed on social media. Or that's not the stuff that gets the million views on social media because it's not polarizing, right? But I still think that's eventually going to cut through because that's how athletes should think.
Yeah.
So it's also like, okay, this is what athletes are striving for. This is also how athletes need to think about where they're going. So for me, I like the fact that Draymond Green can then go into his hotel room and do a podcast and give you a firsthand account of what actually happened in the game from his perspective. Now, there are repercussions with that.
Yeah.
You know, what position does that put your teammates in? They have to answer questions according to details that outside people will not have. That it can compromise them. But I think if you're able to, you know, kind of straddle that line, then you can cut through.
What was the rumor or whatever, that they were getting information from his podcast or whatever? Like, I don't know if that's true, but
also, I mean, I'm the one dictating the information that you hear. So is it really the information that you should be paying attention to?
Could be the opposite.
It could be. You have no idea.
Yeah.
Right? So it can be utilized that way too.
Well, I imagine if you looked at the podcast downloads that it would tell you how much of demand there is, because it seemed like everyone was talking about it, right? So that first person perspective feels like it's not only helpful, but probably where we're headed, right? Where athletes have more power and they can go in, talk about these things themselves. They don't need a network.
But also you see the way that creates a news cycle and a ripple effect. So when Draymond releases his podcast on Colin Cowherd's podcast network, then that gets amplified on ESPN, on Fox, and every other news segment starts promoting your podcast. Right? So that's the genius of it. It's watching Stephen A. Smith and his book Straight Shooter. Right? He's utilizing his platform to sell his own book, which is one of the reasons why it will be a New York Times bestseller. So using one platform to build another while being able to capitalize on that economically is all the plan.
You wrote a bestseller, didn't you?
I did.
You did?
I did.
How was that process?
Arduous.
Yeah. I've heard it's not the most fun thing in the world. It's difficult, right?
So for me, I mean, there's a level of positioning for anything that you do. Right?
So to give people context, it was your whole story, right?
Yes.
This was what, 2015, 2016?
Yeah, this is about, wow, I've aged quickly.
Right, but it was around there.
8 years ago,
and it was just your whole story, right? From reaching the mountain, falling back down, now climbing back up, the whole deal. But talk me through the process of why you wrote it, writing it, etc.
So I have a lawyer who's a really good friend who went through a really bad divorce. And this happened to me after I went through my accident, after I broke off my engagement with my significant other. I was living here in the Lower East Side. I was not in a great space. I was partying with my friends, living a completely different lifestyle.
And what year is this?
I mean, this is 2014, 2015.
Okay, so
I
was before that.
Yeah, I was depressed.
Yeah.
I was kind of depressed. And the most challenging aspect of it in New York is when people recognize you. It's like, oh, you used to be the guy on the, what happened?
Yeah.
Right? So having to answer that question all the time.
Was that, I stopped there because I feel like that's probably something that I know personally I would struggle with, right? Is you probably went from a degree of when people saw you in the streets, they're like, it's fucking Jay Williams, right?
Yeah.
And then what you just framed it there as, you used to be that guy, right?
Exactly.
That flip, it may not sound like a lot to a lot of people, right? But just knowing mentally that probably messed you up a little bit, I imagine.
Joe, come on. It's like 4 years ago, if I said Disney to you, you're like, stock prices, wow. I say Disney to you now, you're like, it's interesting time. Bob Iger's coming back, Bob Chapek out, right? It ebbs and flows. So for me at that time, what Jay Williams had meant to me before was this high level of people trying to achieve something that I never even thought I would be able to achieve.
Yeah.
Right? You become the second pick in the draft. You play for the Chicago Bulls. You have Michael Jordan's locker room. You have deals with Chevrolet, deals with Gatorade. You have all these different brands. Like, you're creating a business. You know, I never thought I would be a millionaire. I just got lucky enough to become a millionaire and playing basketball. Whereas that state of awe changed to a look of pity and sorrow. And where did you, I know you're, oh, the motorcycle.
Yeah.
So for me, I didn't know how to frame that narrative. And
Is that where the depression came from?
The
not specifically that, right? Switching, but
take a sip of my coffee.
Yeah. I imagine that. I mean, we don't have to go into all the details.
No, let's go into it.
I just think it's fascinating, right? Because I really do think that if you were to point out, people that have done exactly that, second pick in the draft, I imagine that's probably one of the best feelings in the world, right? I can only imagine you, your family, everyone involved. Amazing.
And a level of being overwhelmed and over-indexed from that kind of ultimate outcome that occurred, by the way.
What do you mean by that? Like, too happy? Like,
well, not too happy. I mean, it's this moment where you are thrusted, and when I say over-indexed, with decisions, not really having the finance background or business background to make these decisions. And a lot of people that came into your life for the purpose of making money. So recognizing that, but then the trust level, I mean, you talk about this and how you're scaling your business right now. Like, when your partner is your wife, there's a level of trust there on what are production costs, how are we keeping overhead down.
Everyone has the same incentives.
Exactly, how are we increasing the margins? And for us, thinking you know how to answer that while still learning the business, but trusting people to run the business for you is a really hard position to be in, especially when there's millions of dollars on the line. So things had changed for me. The relationships had changed for me. When I'm shaking David Stern's hand, being the second pick in the draft, I'm like, wow, that equates to $14.6 million over 3 years. That gets inflated by 11%. You start recognizing all these, and I look at my mom and my dad, I'm like, okay, they are now employees of my LLC. Should they be employees of my LLC? How much should I pay them? Oh, I get gift tax over anything that's $10,000 or more. What's the right way to funnel money towards them? Should I create a business where I make an investment, what is that investment I want to make and what business? Who am I trusting to run accounting on all that business? How much trust should I give my parents?
Yeah, there's a million things.
Oh, and you get conflated with also like who you love and who's been around longest with, am I conflating that with who's the most competent to run my business?
Yeah.
And I see that now with kids. I go, my dad's been around for my whole life. He's helped me make sound decisions. Okay, does that mean your dad is competent enough to be your agent?
Yeah.
Like we need to be able to decipher between all these worlds that we live in. And
it feels like that almost like hasn't changed, right? From when you were doing it to now, they still struggle with a lot of those issues, right? I mean, maybe you have better people in place and there's better infrastructure, but at the end of the day, you still have to hire an agent. You still have to figure out what your parents are, if they're going to be involved or not be involved. What is the solution to that, right? Like, it doesn't feel like there's a great one.
Well, I mean, I think in a way I try to provide that
Yeah.
for young people because I think there's a lot of ways you can go about doing things now. If you have your ducks in a row,
Yeah.
you can. I mean, it's almost like what we've done with the Honest to a degree, right? It's like, let's look at something. So you get an endorsement deal. If you're the second pick or first pick in the draft, you can probably demand this right now where there's so many extra dollars on the table that you have no idea of the world that even exists that comes along with it. So you have three cameras here, right? So the way I look at it from the production side is I say, okay, let's say Chevrolet comes to me and they want to pay me $1 million a year to be the face of Chevrolet. So I'm getting my NBA contract. That's 4% that I might owe my agent, but I'm going to negotiate my agent down because if I'm going to be the first pick in the draft, that's fixed.
Yeah.
Right? That's fixed. So maybe I can get you for 1% just to manage my relationship with my team and be that buffer. I don't really need to pay you 4%. Okay. Marketing wise, if I work with a content house and Chevrolet wants to pay me $1 million, my agent will then get 20% of that. But here's a way I've learned how to pay myself. So if I have my own production company, right, for being that top tier person for Chevrolet, hey, wait, I can pay my production company and say, hey, agent, you're going to only get 10%. That other 10% is going to come back through my company. And in a way, let me outsource all production and say to Chevrolet, hey, by the way, your creative agency or that third party that you outsource to production-wise,
We don't need them.
why do we need them?
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to tell you what is truly authentic to me. My team will be able to tell you that. So if I'm spending time with you and I say, okay, you like, every time you drive your car, you like to eat Oreos, or you like to you like to listen to country music.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Like now I can build the right creative for Chevrolet to best showcase you in that Chevrolet spot. And by the way, are we doing a linear spot? Or are we doing a digital spot? Right? So then think about how now all of a sudden you're in business with the athlete. And by the way, how you outsource that from a production perspective, instead of them using a third party, you say, no, we can utilize that. We can shoot it properly. And all of a sudden, if you work out that deal, now you're creating enterprise with something that actually has a P&L, and you can increase your overall business strategy because now you're eating from multiple streams of income.
If you look at the most, what people would consider the financially successful athletes in the world today, right? There's a few different ways to do it, in my opinion. You can get paid a shit ton of money through your contract, which is how a lot of people do it. And then you look at guys like a LeBron, a Kevin Durant, right? People like that, and there's others in other sports. But they built these, to your point, platforms or enterprises where there's 4 or 5 different things going on. They all leverage each other.
They do.
And
ecosystem.
And in a lot of times, what they're doing is they're building enterprise value. And they're doing it so they can sell that for a multiple that they wouldn't be able to get elsewhere, right? LeBron can go and do commercials, but there's only so many commercials he can do. There's only so much a brand's going to pay him, and that's physical time out of his hands. It's much easier to go hire someone to run a production house or a studio or an investment firm or a tequila company or whatever it is, right? Have them be the CEO, put some money into it, whatever, or raise money, whatever it is, get a multiple of that, and use your power and influence and connections to scale that. And I think that's changed over time, right? Like even if you look at Michael Jordan, when he first started, sure, the Nike deal everyone knows about, but he was doing the same commercials with Gatorade, with Hanes, with the same stuff. And I think over time, that's more people are becoming accustomed to that. But you have to really want to be an entrepreneur. You can't just say, I'm going to go hoop and that's it. Or you have to have someone that's willing to do it, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
But the reality is that I learned quickly that as an athlete or a TV personality, this whole world of 6 degrees of separation is throw it out the window.
Yeah.
It's 1 degree of separation. Every entrepreneur, every investment banker, every politician I've met, wanted to be an athlete in some form or fashion, and every athlete wants to be some kind of entertainer,
Oh, they all want to
politician,
be the opposite,
CEO.
100%.
So who is bridging that gap? And the more you can get the athlete into, okay, like let's realistically look at it. If you're making $35, $40 million a year, what is it to you? If you're Joe Burrow, you're about to sign a contract for $50 million a year. What is it to you to take two of the best seats in the house that the team is willing to give you and start reaching out to different executives in different fields that you're interested in to come to games, to meet post-game for a drink afterwards, to sit down with you and your team to say, here are a couple ideas we sketched for you. What is your interest? What do you think about this business model? Where should we go?
Yeah.
I mean, it just creates an ecosystem that is hard to turn down opportunity, and it's all about access, man. At the end of the day, most people don't have access to the type of deals that athletes have access to.
Yeah.
You got to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Access is like the number one word, I would imagine, right?
And then execution.
Execution,
obviously.
yeah, for sure. I feel like I see a lot of athletes not taking advantage of that sometimes, right? And I think that's probably frustrating to a degree to people who don't have the access, who have great ideas, or trying to raise money, or trying to do these things. But it is the world we live in.
So can I get back to my one point real quick?
Ahead.
So I was going to say the reason why I think I decided to write the book was for a multitude of reasons. Number one, it was something that was cathartic for me, and I wanted to grow through the process of really trying to recognize who I was and who I wanted to become. So taking you on that journey with me, I thought was important. And probably the second reason, which is probably more important than the first, was I think a lot of times as an athlete, I was always seen as such an outlier. I wasn't relatable. And there were certain things with my personal life that I felt if I were to communicate to the public, I would become judged on. Like, you know, Tom Brady going through a divorce. Like, and I think
Can we stop there for a second? I think that was the most fucked up thing in sports media this year. How maybe you agree, maybe you don't.
I wholeheartedly agree.
I think that so if you remember correctly, the picture of him, he looked like a different person, right, at a press conference. That picture was probably one of the most shared images on social media this year, right? When it went up, everyone was tweeting about it. What's wrong with Tom? Tom looks like something's wrong, whatever. Think about his mindset during that period of time. And maybe you look out and you're like, Tom doesn't give a shit. He's not on Twitter. He doesn't care, right? But at the end of the day, that's a person, right? The guy is clearly going through something extremely, extremely difficult. And I thought to myself, literally when that happened, I was like, there's no fucking way in hell I'm going to share that. There's no way in hell. That guy is clearly going through something. And it came out weeks later that it was a divorce and you know, everything that goes along with that. But I just felt that if that wasn't Tom Brady, one, it wouldn't have happened, right? People would be sensitive to that or have some empathy to the situation. But I was very disappointed in whether you want to call it the system or whatever it is, that people felt that was okay to do. I don't know. Maybe you felt the same, but
I feel that way.
It was sad. It was sad.
I feel that way a lot of times. I mean, welcome to the news industry.
Yeah.
And news media entities prey upon those type of stories. Now you have Giselle, one of the most beautiful supermodels and businesswomen in the world, going through a divorce with Tom Brady. Who can I link Tom Brady to now?
Yeah.
Like, oh, this girl took a picture, was at the game wearing a Tom Brady jersey. Oh, are they dating? Like, what does that mean?
Tom's like, I have no idea who that is.
It's like what I saw with Kanye. Not to bring Kanye into it because it brings up a bigger conversation, but a media person was trying to take a picture of Kanye a couple of days ago with his new wife. And he was like, yo, man, I don't want any pictures taken of me right now. Like, I'm not ready for the world to know that me and my new wife, while we're still trying to figure out who we are, now I got to deal with that and Kim and, my ex-wife and my kids and how's that going to affect my kids? So it creates this world where you become reluctant to be your real self because you can't be your real self. So you become a facade. But then people kill you for saying everything politically correct because we wish you would actually just tell us how you really feel. No, you don't, because you will kill me for telling you how I really feel.
He literally said, 70% of the time he lies up on the...
Yeah, why wouldn't you? I mean, this is 8 years ago. I was like, 80% of NBA players smoke marijuana. Yeah. And like NBA guys are like, why would you say that, blah, blah. I'm like, it's true. Yeah. I'd much rather you smoke cannabis than you actually go home and take 3 ibuprofen 800s. You know what that does to the lining of your stomach? Yeah. Like, or as Keyshawn and I joke around on our show, he's like, oh, we call that, Dr. Wizard.
Yeah. I don't smoke weed, but I always laugh at people that drink a lot, complain about people smoking weed. I'm like, that's fucking poison, and this one's legal too.
Let me pose this on you.
Yeah.
Even if you're against smoking marijuana.
Yeah.
So Patrick Mahomes is about to play in an AFC championship game, right? He has a high ankle sprain. Have you ever had a high ankle sprain?
Yeah, it's not.
Okay.
It's not.
I've had a high ankle sprain. Just me rolling my ankle. I've never had a high ankle sprain. Somebody that is 6'5", 290 pounds rolling on my ankle. Okay.
I thought it was broke at first.
I thought it was broken too,
Yeah.
but now I have to get out of the way of Cincinnati's defense. But by the way, their D-line is pretty special. I saw what they did to Josh Allen for 10 carries and 26 yards, the best running QB beside him and Lamar Jackson. Debate it, I don't care. That's challenging. So this on a Dr. Wizard is way more acceptable because the world doesn't really know about it as much, more so than smoking cannabis that gets criticized. Right? Even though the conversation I think has changed around that to a degree. But if you're thinking about ways to decrease inflammation, like that's an alternative way. I'd much rather do that than guys on the plane drinking a six-pack or smoking cigarettes post-game.
Yeah.
It's just all the way the stories are framed that can get utilized against the athlete.
Yeah, well, and a lot of that goes back to the headline stuff, right? When you have to lead with something that's super aggressive to get attention, that incentivizes you to do the opposite of nuance, right? And it's not.
And that's why I wrote a book.
Yeah.
That's why I wrote a book, Life is Not an Accident. Because for me, instead of trying to be polarizing by telling everybody in the world how different I am, I try to create more relatability tactics.
Yeah.
Right? And so I say, okay, so my lawyer goes through a really bad divorce. His wife leaves him after 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, what was the story you were going with that?
So essentially, like, my lawyer has done extremely well. Really good guy. He's one of my best friends. Literally came home one day, his wife was gone.
Just left.
Gone.
Got up and left. Didn't say anything?
His motorcycle accident. And in my brain, I saw him deal with that in real time, and I said, damn, I thought what I went through was really tough. I can't imagine going through that. And I saw how depressed he was, and I saw how painful it was, and I saw how difficult it was for him to
His motorcycle
speak to
accident is in his worst point in his life.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Right? And how do you build those connection points to other people by saying, I'm just like you in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And here are the ways that I learned how to fight through the struggle. And maybe there's some lessons that I learned throughout my journey that you can see applicable in your life, and we can share our stories and create that kind of communicative measure instead of me being off by my own and just dealing with my pain by myself.
Yeah.
And literally build off that narrative. And I think that's what I've been able to do.
When you think about the depression in general, it sounds like part of the book was helpful to that, right? Of getting your thoughts out and telling everyone the complete story. But it also sounds like you might have dealt with a lot of that before writing the book. Was there anything that you look back on that was specific that was like super helpful in getting your mind to shift on some of these things?
So I am obsessive compulsive. I have addictive tendencies in my life. And I think one of the things that I really learned during that time, and I can't say who I learned it from because it was a private conversation, but I think a lot of those addictive principles that I had, like I was addicted to the court. Like to me, it was all about basketball, education, business, all day, every day. I was a little bit rebellious, and I had some moments where I did some things I probably shouldn't have done, which ultimately probably led me to my motorcycle accident, right? But I think when I had my accident, this loss of identity, this loss of self, led me to have that same kind of addictive measure towards something that continued to numb me from the pain. That was Oxycontin, that was drinking, that was just being depressed. And I think learning how to channel that towards things that have positive benefits in my life was my secret. I was like, wait, channeling that energy towards my wife, channeling that energy towards my children, channeling that energy towards a project, channeling it towards my career. Now there's different things I've had to learn about that process, right? Because a lot of it
it's not overnight, I imagine, right?
Career driven,
Yeah.
right? Like I was like, okay, like I want to be the best, most relatable person there is on TV, and not just give the normal polarizing take, but actually think about it. Think how it would affect me. Think about how it would affect the athlete. Think about it through the prism of business and sports, and then create that red thread and tie it through for everybody. That's a different entry point than most people. But I had to become addicted to the process, frankly. And then I think sometimes, man, like moments lend themselves to you for good or for bad. Like, today is the 3-year anniversary of Kobe Bryant passing away. And like, Joe, I'll never forget, man, like I was on my way to ESPN to do a game. And I was living in Brooklyn. I was going to the South Street Seaport. I was in an Uber over to Brooklyn Bridge and literally got a call that Kobe Bryant has just passed away in a helicopter accident. Now, it's almost like those are moments where I don't know what I'm going to say on TV, but I had this relationship with Kobe on the outside looking in. You know, he was like a brother to me, but more like a mentor. But I didn't spend every day with Kobe. My interactions with Kobe, I would see him once every year, but he would always talk to me like I was his little guy. And I've had some moments working out where I would see things, I was like, damn, okay, like I have to model my life. And like all of a sudden being thrusted on camera during that moment and like, tell the world what Kobe means to you in 2 minutes. What the fuck?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to do that?
It's an impossible task.
Yeah, and you start speaking from your spirit, from your soul. And then one of the most challenging aspects, and I talked to my wife about that, was here I was, I almost passed away when I was 21 years old. I went through depression. I pulled myself out of depression and started building this career in media. And a lot of the Mamba mentality is what I have subscribed to in my life. It's helped me get through a lot of troubling shit. And
that's just like hard work in that perspective.
Yeah, but also like seeing what I want to accomplish, not seeing what just occurred, right? So extracting positives from all these other lessons that people would say were failures. And I looked at it as opportunities to grow and become better, right? So translating that energy into like, okay, like let's keep working, let's be better. Like here's my goal. Here's how my goal has changed. Here I want to continue to achieve my goal. And literally building that into a sports business plan. Right? Like there's a business plan for how you become a max player. There's a business plan for how you become the next LeBron James, like, and literally following what that plan is. So for me in that moment to all of a sudden say, here you are in TV talking about a guy that's really epitomized that, ups and downs, whether cheating on his wife, whatever that may be, right? Just the roller coaster ride of life. But he always strived to be better, was hard as hell. And then all of a sudden when you go viral, because of your comments, you're like, how is that supposed to make me feel? I wasn't trying to go viral.
Yeah.
I was just telling you honestly how that moment was for me and what I felt. What are you supposed to do with that? Are you supposed to, and it's almost like how, and this is what happens when you're in media. I'm about to say something that I know is going to go viral. So when Damar Hamlin almost dies on the football field, and Skip Bayless, who's been in media for a very long time, decides to send a tweet with a punctuation at the end, he knows exactly what he's doing, right? Even if that was a mistake, he's been so trained, he knows how media works. That creates stir and attention. So while this guy is fighting for his life on the field, you are more worried or preoccupied about what does this mean about the playoffs and how is this going to, what are the implications on the playoffs and, you know, where the home game is and all these end kind of details around the nuances or rules of the game. And then that turns into Shannon Sharpe reacting to that, not coming to work the next day. Now, whether Shannon Sharpe was really pissed off about it, or I think he really was, but that's a little bit of the WWE measure, right? To all of a sudden, then him coming back, them arguing, does Shannon Sharpe want to be on the show or not? Shannon Sharpe should do his own thing. Skip Bayless is the villain. Shannon Sharpe is the hero. But you're really paying attention to everything Shannon Sharpe and Skip Bayless are talking about, aren't you? Yeah. So, like, in my brain, it's hard for me to exploit whether meaning to do that or not meaning to do that. I'm having the conversation more so at home about when I'm getting calls, this show wants you on and that show wants you to react to. I'm like, I don't know if I want to go around and do 6 or 7 shows to relive the pain or anger or frustration that I had in that moment talking about a guy that was meaningful to me passing away.
Yeah.
Should I do every show? Does that elevate me? Should I not capitalize on that? But then when I see other people do that and I see it bolster their profile, you're like, I don't want to be that. But then that gets rewarded by society. That gets spoken about. That helps contract negotiations. So how do you navigate that? So for me, I'd much rather have a platform where I can tell you what time that was, regardless of whether it was done maliciously or not, the intent to capitalize on it is what capitalism is, right? So when you try to go the opposite direction of that, that's who I associate my profile with.
I feel like it's almost in some way networks are appeasing the lowest common denominator, right? Of people that want that type of stuff. Because personally, right, I would much rather hear you break down a basketball play or Dan Orlowski break down what a quarterback's thinking on NFL Live, right? I'm more interested in that stuff. I don't care about your headline opinion on someone's off the court issue, right? It's just like, it's not what I come to watch the TV for. It's not what I come to watch the show for. But that's not what they're giving us, right? That's not what they do. That's like more independent stuff. That's not main network driven, high quality viewership perspective, right? And it feels like, I personally think that's going to change at some point, right? I think that in one part of my mind, it says, look, this is being driven down our throats. What's the most popular social network in the world right now? TikTok.
Yep.
It's fucking 15-second clips.
Exactly.
Movies.
Headlines.
If you asked a young person today, when's the last movie they watched? They don't watch movies. They don't watch movies. They don't watch TV. They don't watch movies. They watch that because YouTube videos have to be shorter. Anything over 30, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever, unless it's very, very, very high quality, no one's going to watch it. The attention spans have dramatically dropped. It's all attention-based stuff. But these things ebb and flow, right? And my bet is, and a lot of the stuff that I focus on work-wise, is that'll change. I think that at the end of the day, quality always wins over quantity, right? And attention stuff. And my guess is whether it's me writing a newsletter or ESPN kind of in millions of homes, that's the stuff people are going to want.
Agree. I don't want to be a part of the masses.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
But every show's not like that, right? I would argue that.
What shows are we talking about and what platforms?
Your platform, right, from 6 to 10 in the morning, I wouldn't consider that.
Our platform has different challenges, though, right?
Yeah.
So, due to the old metrics of how we deem radio to be successful or not, you look in different markets.
Yep.
So if, prime example, like, we got taken off the New York market because we didn't rate as well in New York, but we're more of a national show. So if you're waking up in New York City every day and you're turning on sports talk radio, what do you want to hear about? I want to hear about my Yankees. I want to hear about my Mets, the Knicks, probably not the Nets as much because they were in New Jersey. I want to hear about the Rangers. I want to hear about like all my New York teams. I don't give a damn about anything else. I don't care about what Aaron Rodgers is doing in Green Bay. I don't care that Derek Carr is probably, not going to come back and play for the Raiders. I don't care about any of these subjects. So when you're doing a national show, trying to get local ratings, it's not going to hit the same way as a local show, right? So once again, it all depends upon what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to have a national appeal or are you trying to have a local appeal? And I think that's where linear TV or old school metrics in the way you're looking at radio, it's challenging. Now if you're a show on TV, if you don't have a bona fide social media blueprint, you're going to lose.
The show or the personalities?
The show.
Yeah.
I've hired my own social media team for me personally because I've also seen, wow, okay, I just set this on GetUp. GetUp posted this. GetUp has 1.2 million people that follow it on social media. Let's say that's on IG. GetUp doesn't even have a TikTok account, right? So they post that gets 35,000 likes. I take that same clip, I post that on my channel, all of a sudden I get 150,000 likes. Like, wow, okay, I've just surpassed what TikTok or what GetUp has done on my own channel here, but people would never know I even said that on GetUp if I didn't post that on my own page. Because that's how people consume content.
How do you think about that, though? Because I think that's a very interesting point. And it's clearly shifted, right? A decade ago, I don't think a lot of people had social media teams to run this stuff. I mean, some of these platforms didn't even exist, right? So how do you think about personal branding while working for a larger corporation or network or something like that, right? It seems like it's very important.
Two different things.
Yeah.
Like I literally look at ESPN as their brand and Jay Williams Inc. as his own brand.
Yeah.
And the two are collaborating. And I think the way we're moving is you have to learn how to be partners with talent instead of living in this world that talent just works for me. Because you have to grow at the same time. And it's, when people say, well, you're on this show, tweet this out. I don't have to tweet that out. I don't need to let my audience know what I'm doing on this show. Like, this is my own personal, unless I'm incentivized. So I truly do believe that relationship and it's athletes, its influencers will come more to, like, how do you get more equity in things? How do you get more incentivized in bringing your social component to the table? And by the way, social, I talk to people differently on Twitter than I do on IG than I do on TikTok. they're all different platforms, right? So the way I actually look at all that information, it's skewed differently. Like there might be a snippet of what I said of a bigger point that I'm willing to put on IG that I'm willing to take a 15-second clip because I think that's actually going to generate more content or more views on TikTok. So I think you have a lot of traditional companies or media companies that are just getting hip to that now, and they're trying to catch up, but it's still hard because they're still in the old school matrix of what are ratings? How do I do advertising?
Well, and talent
dollars?
Works directly for me.
Exactly.
I don't care what they do outside of this.
But now you care what they do outside of it.
Yeah, which is the opposite now. Right? Like if I was an athlete, if I was a big name athlete, maybe someone kind of in between where you don't necessarily need, you need the exposure, not someone who doesn't. I would go to ESPN and I'd say, hey, look, I'll come on your show every Monday. Every single Monday I'll come on. But I want you to promote this podcast I just started. Or I want you to promote my YouTube channel. Or whatever it is, right? Whatever you're trying to promote on the side. It could be a business, it could be anything else. I'll do it every single week for free. You don't have to pay me a dime, right? But I think, not only do I think that some networks would be willing to do that, depending on who you go to or whatever it is in the caliber of person, but I think that, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're there yet with a lot of athletes. Who's the talent? Yeah, I think
who's the talent?
I think that's what matters, right?
Because if you're Tom Brady, I have religion of sports. You're going to buy X amount of pieces of content per year.
Yeah.
If you're Stephen A. Smith, hey, I have my own production company. I'm now the executive producer of First Take, KD. So for certain athletes, I do believe that eventually that will be able to happen to a degree at scale for athletes.
And what do you mean by that?
So I believe that eventually we're going to get to a world where every athlete is going to have some kind of affiliation with the content house. Because you're going to want somebody to think about your brand 24/7, and you're going to want to take advantage of a lot of the brand dollars around the athlete. So like I said before, Chevrolet wants to come to me for $1 million. Okay, even in this local market of Chicago, I'm your guy. Great, allocate $400,000 for marketing, and now let me build out the social strategy.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you, if you're a brand, you're going to outsource, why wouldn't you give that to some? Now you're in business more so with the athlete than ever before.
Yeah.
As long as they're hitting their KPIs, as long as they're hitting like the main themes that you want as a brand to accomplish, who do you care who produces the content?
Yeah. I think talent is the most important thing though, right? Because what I struggle with personally is I have a million ideas. I could literally tell you 10 right now that I think would be big businesses, but finding operators to run the businesses are difficult. And I think it only gets more difficult when you're an athlete because you have to find someone that not only is a good operator, but you can trust. And I want to trust a partner, obviously, but that's a different level of trust, right? Especially if you're investing personal capital in the business, they have rights to your image to some degree, whether you sign them off or it's just by affiliation. I think that's probably the biggest hurdle right now, I would say.
I mean, are you around competent people 24/7? And it's really funny because a lot of athletes aren't around competent people 24/7. And then when you enter the realm of being around competent people or really smart people, you realize that they are even more voracious sharks than the non-competent people.
Oh yeah.
Right. So you're like, well, hold on. It's like Shark Tank, right? You're like, hold on.
Oh, the people that know what they're doing, they want even more.
I didn't think about it that way. Damn. Like, so it's all the level of thought. That's why I think who you empower to be the forward-facing entity for your business is so important. That you have the resources to tap into, whether that's your respective school that you graduated from, or like I would just be scouring the market for the best of the best. Like, and that's why I go back to this. Like for me, John Mack, who was the CEO of Morgan Stanley, when I was coming out of school, I wanted to learn about finances. Didn't mean I had to put my money with Morgan Stanley. Hey, John, like you have a home in Quogue in the Hamptons. Like I'm from Jersey. You're good friends with Coach K. Here's what I'm thinking about what I want my portfolio to look like in 3 or 4 years. Is this in alignment with where the markets are going? What do you think I should be doing with my money? You're a family friend. Tell me what you see running the huge ecosystem of Morgan Stanley. Why wouldn't I tap into that? Or why wouldn't I bring that to my team and build that relationship? Just because you may not be as competent doesn't mean that you can't bring that relationship and network, which takes what, an hour of your day? An hour of your day to say to your agent, I want to know who the top CEOs are in my local market. And I want to have dinner with them. Okay.
Set up a dinner with each of them.
Like, how is that difficult?
Yeah. In the end, the agent might make money off it.
And at the end of the day, I'm going to look at my agent and say, don't think that I don't know how you're scaling your business based upon me being your client. By the way, I'm going to need 20% of your business if you want to continue to be in business with me. Why wouldn't you do that? Like I watch LeBron, I watch Rich Paul, I watch Mav. That's an ecosystem. Why wouldn't you create your own ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that's probably like the level a lot of people are striving for now, right? Yeah, is he set up a business in a way where multiple different facets. Basically, every part of his life that he had outsourced somewhere else, he created an in-house solution for. Production, agency stuff, all of that, right? Marketing. And I think there's only a select number of athletes in the world that can do that, but over time that number is going to increase, right? It's going to, because the costs are getting lower to do things, the way that you can interact with people, to reach people is changing. So I think that probably, you know, gets more possible over time, but he right now is like the top.
Or somebody creating an entity in which you can help athletes, the right athletes, squeeze that margin and all the productive, all the creative aspects too. Like I think that's what, frankly, we're building with our company and Improbable, is how to help athletes, the right athletes, scale that portion of their business. Because not every athlete will be able to do it, but there is a lot of untapped revenue on certain deals that athletes look at, who only look at it from a binary perspective, right? So it's like, oh, here's my deal with X brand. Oh, I'm going to get $2 million. I'm like, well, wait a second. Like, what amount of money does that brand allocate for all their athletes and how they do production? By the way, like, let's carve off a slight piece of that. And all of a sudden, if you're squeezing the margins on that, you're making an extra 15%, you know, on what their production budget is. That's untapped revenue that you would never have seen before.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you look at a model that way?
Yeah. What do you do outside of ESPN?
I do a lot.
It sounds like you do a lot. So for me, I don't know, we're sitting in your restaurant. Which is the Cabin, New York City in the East Village. Great restaurant. So there's this, you're talking about other business here. Like, just tell me the scope of, I mean, there's probably a million things, but the few of the biggest ones.
So I'm not sure that restaurants are the best business investment to get involved in, but, you know.
Why not?
I just think there's the last couple of years have been really challenging.
Yeah,
right?
specifically
with the
around
pandemic.
the pandemic,
And I will give, I mean, Joey Aponte, who was like a brother to me, who's been involved in this business for a very long time, is one of the most creative people that I've ever met and works his ass off. I mean, he lives, eats, and shits this restaurant 24/7.
Yeah.
And looking to scale that in New York City and creating the right branding and imaging around it. Like, you know, we have a couple of different partners, Kenny Hamilton, who manages a couple of different musicians, we bring people through here. We've had 50 Cent here, we've had Fat Joe, we've had other people here that have came and plugged us. So we kind of create that energy here in the Lower East Side, which is really cool. And it's a place I can always come to. So he's worked his tail off to kind of manage expectations through the pandemic and PPP loans and all the things we are through. So it's challenging. I have my own production company. I'm partners with Giannis in doing that. So once again, scaling a lot of his endorsements.
And what do you guys do for production? Is it like longer form stuff? Is it documentaries? Is it
all the above?
Yeah.
I mean, so we're in the process of selling a docu right now. We've been able to work with all of his endorsements and scale that to a degree from the production perspective and the creative perspective, and unscripted and scripted content. So building that out. And once again, that whole concept themes around how to do that at scale for other athletes and create, you know, for lack of a better terms, like what's a new formed agency, right? But it's under a content house. So we have all these opportunities from, you need help with your contract, we could bring in the right consultative measure to help you with that, even though I don't want to get involved in contracts. I'd rather stay away from that. That's your agent's responsibilities. But how do I help scale the athlete business from a managerial perspective and also from a content perspective, thinking about the athlete truly from a 360-degree measure?
Yeah.
So I think that is something I'm passionate about. Looking to kind of re-emerge myself back in the sports business market, something that I have a couple of things up my sleeve that I'm working on. And then I made some investments on things that I think are very aligned with who I am authentically. So, you know, getting involved in the risk mitigation space was something that was very passionate for me because of having disability insurance, having to think about a Lloyd's of London policy when I had decided
How does Lloyd's of London work, by the way? I think this is fascinating, and I think a lot of people don't know about this type of stuff, right? Which is just like athletes getting insurance policies in general.
I'm curious, what's your perception on Lloyd's of London and the policy at Measure overall?
I imagine that most people think of it as a typical insurance policy, right? Like one of the funniest examples I always hear about is, they're like, Lionel Messi has his left foot insured for $600 million. And I'm like, does he really, first off? And two, like, what the fuck does that
What does that even mean?
Yeah, like, what does that even mean, right? So I think of it as just disability insurance, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you can't play your sport, you have a policy that covers some degree of that. And there's payments made and et cetera.
Loss of value.
Loss of value,
yes.
yeah, pretty much. So how do you explain it to people, though?
So in a very simplistic form, because I've learned that
that's easy.
that way cuts through with people, right? I'm like, hey,
that's
so
what I prefer.
You should have the best coverage in case the ultimate devastation moment occurs on the court, right? But it's still, you have to dig so deep into the trenches about loss of value, because some players particularly have injuries in which they're still able to play. So like literally going through the insurance company to try to say, well, the value went from being the second pick in the draft to being, you know, a second round. That value is equated towards $2.5 million. Like you still have to show that it didn't equate to that, which is challenging. So
I feel like we've seen NFL, like, wasn't there a couple guys over the last few years that got hurt before the draft and fell, and they had those, I want to say maybe Jalen Smith. There was a few guys I feel like that got hurt in the bowl games or whatever and went through, and they had to deal with this stuff. And it's very difficult determining, to I think your point, which is like, were you going to be a top 5 pick, top 10, 20, 30? You know, we don't know, right?
But here's the only problem with that, even if you are insured properly.
Yeah.
Like, and I try to tell, because I wanted to graduate school in 3 years. I had the chance to. But the amount of money I left on the table was staggering, right? So I had a Lloyd's of London policy for $20 million loss of value.
In college?
In college, right?
Okay.
So
and what is that? And you're making payments in college for that? Or how does that work?
Essentially, you're taking out a loan to make payments that you're allowed to take out.
Same you would do if you're like training for the draft or something else.
1,000%, right? Yeah. And you're paying back that loan with a certain interest rate that is fixed, and you can go about it.
They know you're going to get paid.
But typically, you're allowed to do that because you know
you're going to
you're going to go. Like I knew I was going to go top 5.
Yeah.
So, but the way it was actually explained to me on the back end after I did the Lloyd's of London policy, when you start looking at the holistic aspect of what your value is. So, okay, that $20 million loss of value policy that I had. If I get hurt, else I can never play basketball again, I get that $20 million. But if I were to say, you know what, I'm not going to come back to school, I'm going to go to the NBA, the value of my contract, if I get extended, could be $100 million, right? So this is securing a fraction of that, right? Less than 1/4, essentially. But I much rather tell my client to go play, because then all of a sudden that policy rises to $100 million instead of 20, and you're serving an internship. You're getting paid for an internship. So I much rather you have that increased loss of value contract being a rookie at 19, because I can get you paid $100 million instead of you trying to strive to graduate, that in case you can never play basketball again, you get $20 million.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, right? Because if you leave early, you're 1 year closer to all that stuff, right? Yeah.
And essentially the NBA is paying you as an internship. So, you know, as NBA, if that 3 years is guaranteed, 4th year is team option, the sooner you can get towards that 4th year team option, the better you are.
Yeah.
So like if you're coming to the league at 19 years old, all of a sudden, think about it, if I'm coming to the league at 21 years old, I'm getting my next contract at 24, right? Then I'm getting my next deal, if that's a 5-year deal, at 29. Whereas if I'm getting my deal at 19, I'm getting that next deal at 20.
You want to just move everything up.
Exactly, 22. Then I get my other deal at 26, and I'm getting my next deal while I'm in my prime at 31.
See,
that's
I feel
way
like
different.
People framed all these other alternative options, right? The developmental league, the you have overtime, right?
elite, yep.
There's a bunch of different things
Sit
you
on
can
the
play
board of
overseas.
that, yep.
Yeah, I love overtime, right? And I think that a lot of those things were framed as athletes couldn't get paid in college, right? That has obviously changed. But I feel like it more has to do with this, which is basically you're moving everything up on a timeline where you may be ready to go to the NBA, right? You may be ready to play, like a guy like LeBron. He was clearly ready to go play. That rule
Physically
was
ready.
physically
Yes.
ready, physically ready to go play. There's other guys that may not be ready, but want to move up that timeline, to your point, to get money faster. Everyone has a different family situation back home. Maybe they need the money, right? There's certain things that go along with it. But I'm curious your thoughts on, I mean, you're on the board of overtime, it sounds like. So your thoughts on just this shift overall, right, of athletes choosing different routes, going to college, not going to college, playing overseas, getting to the NBA quicker. You think that's a good thing, more options?
Well, I mean, let's do the one and done scenario, okay?
Yeah.
So, and then I'll let you, in your own mind, compare the two avenues. So I am a one and done guy. I'm slotted to be a top 15 draft pick in the 2023 NBA draft. I'm going to college for 1 year.
Yep.
All I got to do is get by the first semester. So as much as you're going to sit there and tell me that the educational value is important, it's not, right? Because if you know as a coach that this is a filtering system, right, and that you're trying to have me come in to brand the organization and also to worry about that helps you recruit for the following year. Look, I just had this one and done guy. I want him to be on his way. Don't sell me on the education of it.
Yeah.
Okay? But also the training aspect is different. I'm still going to class. Now, I value education, right? So for me, it was about how do I build my course load towards things that are going to help me when I ultimately become a pro and I want to be an entrepreneur.
Yep.
That's not every athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. Guys that know they're leaving in 6 months, they couldn't care less, a lot of them, right?
Why would I care less?
You're incentivized not to.
Like, I'm about to become a millionaire.
Yeah.
So,
and you know you're not, maybe you go eventually, but you're not getting your degree right now.
So Overtime Elite, which actually one of the reasons why I do sit on the board, and I really like their methodology is, okay, hey, look, we're actually going to involve you in financial literacy courses.
Yeah.
We're going to actually teach you that you don't have to pay your agent 4%. You can negotiate that rate down because 80% due to the CBA of your contract is fixed. So I'm being schooled now on my profession.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether I become a pro, I play overseas, I'm learning about the business of my profession. Right? And I'm also learning about how could I pivot off this business model, and maybe I want to get into broadcasting. Maybe I want to get into team ownership. Maybe I want to get into real estate. Maybe I want to work with this aspect of team ownership. So there's so many ways that you can learn about the ecosystem of basketball as a business, which you would never really learn in school. And by the way, now I'm training for 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
Like now I have a nutritionist, right, who's saying
it's like academies in Europe. That's how I think about
Exactly.
it, right? Like if you're a football player, soccer player in Europe,
you're a pro at 13.
you're a pro, yeah, immediately, right? And it's individualized training for a specific thing that you're trying to do for the rest of your life. And we had trade schools, right? There's
There you
trade
go.
schools today. It's the same exact thing, but it's for basketball. It's like I make a joke. I log on to Twitter all the time, and I always see tweets about, man, I wish they taught me finance in high school, or I wish they taught me how to pay taxes. I wish they taught me how to, register a car, like things you actually need to know in the real world. Things that you don't really care about, you actually do learn in school, right? And it feels like that, right? I know I'm going to have to hire a financial advisor. Let's figure out kind of what I need to learn or what I need to do. I know that I'm going to go to the NBA, so let's train for that, obviously. I know that I need to hire a team around me. Let's figure out what that takes to do. And it feels like they're probably taking a more realistic approach than the current legacy system of college.
Well, also, a legacy system of college, you start recognizing, okay, when you see that the NCAA tournament is sold to TNT for X amount of $1 billion, and you're saying, well, athletes now are still, they're getting these NIL deals, and I was like, oh, this NIL deal. I'm like, it still pales in comparison to what these schools are making. And inevitably,
My hot take years ago was that football players, college football players, were going to have revenue sharing. That doesn't seem crazy anymore.
It's not, no.
That was like 4 or 5 years. That before NIL, right? Everyone was like, let's get to NIL first. All right,
I've
we're
been
there.
saying this for 10
We're
years
there,
on
right?
TV.
And
But you know what has to happen if you do rev share?
What?
They have to be employees.
yeah.
They have to have a union.
But when you get
they have
to
to have the union,
when
which
you
they don't
get
have
to
anybody representing the athlete
well,
voice right now.
Look at sports like the UFC, how hard that is
you
to
go.
build unions, right? It's very difficult to get everyone on the same page. People are making same reason why if you're the NFL, the NBA, whatever sports league, you're really representing like 90% of the players. The guys that are making the most money, they're like, hey, I don't like.
You're the anomaly.
Exactly, right? You're representing the practice squad guys. You're representing the minimum guys. And I think that's in a lot of ways why the owners get what they want, because they know that these guys need money, right? They need to check. They don't want to lock out. They don't want these situations. And it's unfortunate because I think there'd be a lot of changes across professional sports. So if you look at the NBA, right? How much value does LeBron drive for the league? How much value does Kevin Durant drive for the league? How much? You could argue these guys, they make what, 35, 40 million bucks a year, 50 million bucks a year. They're worth 3-4 times that, right?
Agreed.
And it's people call me crazy for calling it unfortunate, right? Because they're making a lot of money. It's great. It's amazing. But everyone wants to be paid what they're worth, right? If you're worth $200, $300, $400, $500 million, why shouldn't you be paid that?
I agree with that comment.
Yeah.
But it is like, when you're surrounded by billionaires that are trying to, it's really funny. Whenever, and I said this to you while we were talking, like athletes get criticized way more than politicians or, celebrities to a degree. Like when these contracts are made public, like you don't know how much Usher makes per year. But as LeBron, like you see it right there on paper. Yeah. So people don't feel bad, but you don't know how much the owners are making. That's not public information. That's private information. So when you see the value of these franchises, Matt and Justin Shibia, who are new owners of the Phoenix Suns, when you see them buying a percentage of it for $4 billion, and you're like, well, hold on a second. Joe and Clara Tsai got the Brooklyn Nets for $3.1 billion. Like, where are we going with team evaluations?
Well, Sarver was criticized more than any NBA owner, right? And if people knew how much money he made on the team,
he got blessed. He got blessed for being kicked out of the. It's same with Donald Sterling.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, "Oh, he's crude. Get him out of here." I'm like, "All right, you're blessing him with a $3.4 billion check, whatever it is, from Steve Ballmer to hand over ownership of the team.
There's a reason why they're buying the team too, right? They're not doing it to waste money.
Exactly, they're doing it to make
even
money.
at $4 billion. They think the value is going to go
But are
up.
we eventually going to bottom out in that market? I mean, considering like where macroeconomics are these days, TBD on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, frankly,
I think
with
that
where
the biggest,
TV rights are going too, with Amazon and Apple wanting to play in this form, it's going to be interesting.
I tell people there's three things that the NBA seem to be focused on and are going to be very beneficial for owners. One's the media rights. Yep. They should triple to 75. That every team gets a portion of that. Huge deal, obviously. Owners benefit tremendously. Players benefit also. The NBA is a global game. All you need is a basketball and a hoop. Anyone can play in the world. That's a big benefit over football, which no one else plays in the world, really. And I think they're trying to expand to London, Germany, all these other places.
Just the NBA in Paris.
But football specifically, right? Yep. They're finding it difficult because if you don't play football growing up, you really don't care about it, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't play the sport growing up, if you've never thrown a football, if you've never tackled someone, if you've never done these things or you haven't watched it during your life, it's not as intriguing to you. Basketball is different. You know, they're growing globally. China wasn't even a business in the NBA a couple decades ago. Now it's a $5 billion business. You can't say certain things about them otherwise, right? Like there's just
been down that road before.
It's a big business, right? And my point is that they're now going to do that in Africa. They're going to do that in India. Yeah. The two other biggest regions in the world for that. And then I think the third thing is that has somewhat flown under the radar. It seems is that when team valuations get so high, there's only so many people that can buy those teams, right? There's only so many billionaires, obviously, but then there's only so many billionaires that actually want to own an NBA team. And when you reduce the amount of people that can buy those things, the valuations stop climbing because no one's willing, the demand isn't there. So the NBA is now opening it to sovereign wealth funds. Saudi Arabia can come buy a team if they want, part of a team.
DAOs right? Eventually.
Yeah, right. So endowments, pension funds, all these people, right? So if you're telling me that Harvard University can own 10% of the Celtics, that value is going to go up, right? You're just opening the door to so many more investors. So I think there's a lot of tailwinds powering valuations. The one thing that I mentioned before that I think is going to become a point. I think so. I don't know. The next CBA is up in a year, 2 years,
yep.
right? So a couple of years. I don't think it happens this one, and then you have to wait another 8, maybe 10 years, however long it goes for. But I think that we're reaching a point, and these things happen fast, right? Everything happens fast. Player empowerment is getting to a point where I think at some point. You reach a spot where players are going to demand a share of the upside, right? Michelle Roberts has already said they want equity, some sort of equity for players. I think it's going to be very, 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 very difficult for them to get it. Owners are not going to want to give that up. But I spoke to, and I'm not going to say his name because, again, a private conversation, but a former NBA owner who's very, very wealthy, has an individual business outside of the NBA. He said if LeBron James came to me and said, I need $20 billion to start the live golf version of the NBA tomorrow, I would have it with him within 24 hours.
Not even a question.
Yeah, because that's how powerful the stars are to the league, right? The NBA, all of a sudden, the teams become fungible, right, where they're not, the Celtics are the same as another organization, right? The Lakers are the same as the Thunder because, sure, they're in these big markets, but the players are the valuable things, right? The players, the personalities, the social media, everyone wants to be them. They're recognizable, all these things. They don't play with helmets. All of that, I think, is going to, they're the ones that hold the real power.
And I think you're absolutely on point with that. And I think eventually what you get to is for those players that can kind of warrant that kind of power, then that helps you with retention, right? Yeah. Like all of a sudden, if you're a Kawhi, you have a small piece of the Spurs, you're not thinking about going to the Clippers, right? And probably you would negotiate that in the CBA that you wouldn't be allowed. Yeah. Like if you accept an equity stake within a team, whether that be small or significant, like you're not allowed to be traded. You will be with that team for the rest of your career, which team owners want more than anything. Like they want stability with their franchise. Mm-hmm. By the way, like LeBron in Cleveland, like there was a reason.
How valuable was he to
Cleveland? Oh my God.
Yeah,
just ask Dan Gilbert. I mean, granted now they're back with Donovan Mitchell and some of the pieces they have, but still like every game was on TV. Think about what that does for your advertising. Think about, he was one of the most powerful owners in the NBA because he also owns a lot of the property around, where the building is and stores and parking lots and things of that sort.
That's what the Bucks have done so well. The
Exactly.
Bucks, they own all the real estate around. They built the, whatever they call I don't forget what the village is called, but it's the same thing the Braves have done, right? All these organizations know that the team's just the centerpiece. To your point about production house, everything.
Same thing with Jim Dolan. I mean, think about the rights, or what the Yankees with the Yes Network.
Yeah.
Right? You got Redbird investing in the Yankees, like, one of the biggest private equity firms in the world. Like, so.
AC Milan, it's
a thing that, it's a theme, and you own all the air rights above.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge thing that people would just gloss over and not even paying attention to. So if you have a chance to participate in that from a player perspective, like that's where you're already getting generational worth.
Yeah,
from just
the contracts now have escalated to a point where it's, I mean, even before, but now specifically, right? If you're getting a $250 million contract, you could breathe and you'll be fine.
So we laugh with Giannis. So like 4 years ago, Giannis had that 4-year, $235 million contract. And we're like, that pales in comparison to where guys are now 4 years later.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Like it's just insane where we're going.
Yeah, and I imagine, I mean, his story I think is one of the best in the, not only the NBA but in sports, right? Where he came from, what he had to do to get here, and all this stuff. Like that type of money is not only generational, but I imagine a lot of people, it's more than they could ever imagine, right? Like you could, you're good forever, right? You and your family and all these things, and it's cool to see that because it's obviously one of the things that are driving entertainment for people globally. But I think that over time, eventually, you just want a bigger piece of the pie, right?
Agreed. By the way, we see that, when you talk about NBA Africa, like Masai Ujiri, who is the general manager and president for the Toronto Raptors, they brought a lot of guys over from Africa. They do a ton. Barack Obama is huge in that with Higher Grounds, his production company. They're doing a lot of stuff over in Africa. So when you talk about the game going from China, which is a completely different experiment and experience, frankly, dealing with Tencent and everything that we just dealt with Daryl Morey a couple of years ago, saying free Hong Kong and the financial implications of what happened.
I love Daryl Morey, by the way.
I love Daryl Morey too. I love Daryl Morey too. By the way, I was drafted right after Yao Ming. I mean, if anybody were to really break down, what percentage of Yao Ming's contract had to go
get drafted.
Seriously, like 7'6", a Chinese guy coming out that year.
There's not many of those coming.
But you actually see what percentage of his contract actually had to go back to China. You're like, yo, man, that's
messed up.
That's really fucked up.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, that's where the business of sport is going. It's becoming international.
Yeah. Yeah. You got any questions for me?
I do, man. What is it that you want to build with this whole thing? What's the ultimate goal? What's the end game?
People ask me that all the time. They always ask me that.
Well, so you're saying I didn't come up with a unique question?
No, I just, my point is I don't have a great answer. My answer is always that when I started doing all this stuff, it was born out of genuine interest, right? Which I think has, to a degree, helped me a lot because it's something I would do even if I didn't get paid for it. I literally would have conversations like this. I would research things on my own. I would tell friends about them, and that's really how it was born. My friends would say, and my wife would tell me, you should just do something with this. Like, you always know these interesting facts. You care about these details that no other people knew. Like, you should do something. So I think that's led me to be super successful with this endeavor specifically. But I think about the future, my goal has always been to be the best source and the largest platform globally for sports business. Just the largest and the best globally, right? And that means two different things. The best to me is more important because I want everyone to know when they see something with my name on it that it's quality, and they want it to be very well done, very thought out. It doesn't always have to be opinionated, right? It doesn't have to be a hot take. It doesn't have to be whatever it is, but you know the type of level of quality you're going to get in return. So that's always been important to me. And then I thought that if you do that very well, that was going to be the second part of that, which will scale. What
would be the differentiator from places like Sportico or SBJ, more traditional sources?
Yeah, I think a personality is very important, right? I think having your name behind it is the most powerful thing you can do because people recognize that as you, right? You could look at a company, whether it's one of those companies or someone else, and you may recognize the name, but you don't know exactly what it is, what it stands for, who's behind it, what their thoughts are, what their opinion is, what they like, what they don't like. And you get all of that with me. So I think that's important for sure. And I think the second part of that is building something under your own name gives you the ability to be selective about what you talk about, how you talk about it, what you do with your time, how you build your business, the way that you build your business, who you work with, all of that stuff, right? And I say that because I've sacrificed a ton from like a business growth perspective, from revenue generation, from growth of lists, of email subscribers, growth of accounts, all this stuff, because not only have I been unwilling to work with people I don't agree with or people that I think are difficult, but I've also been unwilling in a lot of instances to talk about things that may be topical or may go viral or things like that, knowing that it's not who I am, it's not the level of quality that I want, it's not the vision of myself that I want other people to see, right? So look, the number one thing I always tell people that want to create content or do similar things that I'm doing is you have to decide two things. You have to decide that you're willing to do this for the rest of your life because it's fucking hard. I'm not going to lie.
It's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle, right? It's 24/7 all the time. You have to be willing to do it forever. And number two is you have to decide before you ever start that you don't give a shit what anyone says.
Agreed.
You literally cannot care what anyone says. Because there's like, there's probably a common joke at this point, but there's certain stages. You look at it, and when I started doing this, my wife was my first subscriber on the newsletter, right? Then I told my brothers about it. I got 3 or 4 more subscribers there. Then I announced it on Instagram. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I probably got 50 more subscribers, like family, friends, whatever, 100 subscribers. I had no social media following, anything. And at first, I'm like, I'm starting to tweet out these links. All these people are like sharing, I'm doing all this stuff. And I'm not naive. Like some of my friends, some people I knew or people that I thought I was good friends with were probably like, look at this idiot. He's got this job. He's doing this on the side. It's not going to work. His opinion is stupid. He's not a good writer. The videos suck. He shouldn't be podcasting. Right? Like a million different things. But if you allow that to debilitize you, whatever. Yeah, if you allow that to stop you, we'll say, you'll never win. So you have to decide immediately before you even start that you don't give a shit what anyone says. And I'm sure it's the same on TV, right? Like
every day,
social media, whatever. And it's probably even more difficult because I feel like I've built these avenues for myself where I'm able to expand on my opinion in a lot of ways, right? Like the newsletter, maybe it's 1,000 words a day. But I can write 1,000 words. That's a lot of words.
That's a lot of words.
That's a lot of words, right? I can do a podcast. We could talk for 5 hours if I wanted to. Or you could talk for 2 minutes, 20 seconds on TV. I've tried to intentionally build systems and avenues where I can be myself and expand on my opinions. And I think that that's becoming more important because similar to how I said before, and I don't want to rant about this, but when I say everything's going short form, right? Everyone's attention spans are dropping. They like TikTok. They like all these things. People still listen to 4-hour podcast episodes. They'll still watch an entire series on Michael Jordan. They'll still watch Joe Rogan talk to someone for 2 hours, right? And there's a reason why that stuff's popular, because it's really high quality and it's long form stuff and it's things people care about. So my bet is that not only does that continue to be more important, but we actually swing the pendulum back a little bit that way, and people care more about the depth of things rather than the kind of the loudness of them, we'll call it.
With everywhere we are from a macroeconomic perspective, right now we're trending towards a recession. You're seeing a number of people being laid off. You're seeing Google lay off 18,000 employees. Within this, as that equates to the sports realm, where do you think the opportunities, they say during recessions are moments where a lot of people are able to capitalize on different opportunities. Like, what do you think those sports opportunities are?
From like a building a business standpoint?
Yes.
So I do it, but media scares me. I think media is very difficult, depending on the business, obviously, and kind of what you're doing. I think that during good times, media can be great. We've seen businesses sell at tremendous valuations. I think that you have to do something different. It can't be the same kind of thing that everyone else is doing. But my problem with media in general right now is that it's what we spoke about, right? Like you have to have an opinion on something. Your voice has to be the loudest, or it has to be super high quality. So media can be good, it can be difficult depending on where it is. I think there's a lot of dollars that are willing to invest in the technology side of things. Yeah. I think tech is a huge opportunity in sports. I literally did a Twitter thread last night about the NFL and technology and kind of how they're thinking about things, the chips in the football, the chips in the shoulder pads, what they're trying to accomplish and all of that stuff. I think that's huge, but I don't think it's huge from that standpoint. I think it's bigger from the fan experience standpoint. I think that, so Formula One's a good example. I don't know if you watch Formula One. Formula One has these driver cams inside the helmet. So they were developed by a company 3, 4, 5 years ago maybe, and they've been testing them out. The thing is they have to be very light because they're trying to make the cars basically as light as possible or close to the barrier that you can get. The drivers are all a certain weight, right? So weight matters a lot.
Yep.
So the camera is like 3 grams. It's very, very light. And they tested them out for years. They just put them on 1 or 2 drivers a race, and eventually, Formula One held control of the tapes and everything, and they would, slowly put them out and give them to people, and people loved them. This year, they're expanding it to every driver, and they're going to put it for everyone. Right? Very good view, everything. But why on a race day can't I just be Lewis Hamilton for the day?
I mean, you think it's going to translate, yeah.
That's what I think, right? You're going to put on a headset, or maybe it's even on the TV or whatever it is, right? And you're going to be him for the day. You're going to sit in the car with him. You're going to do all these things. So I think there's stuff like that that could be very interesting. And I think when you think about sports in general, there's a lot of, dry powder, right? Just money sitting on the sidelines right now. Funds that raised money 2, 3, 4 years ago, haven't deployed all of it. People that are waiting for good opportunities. And when you talk about Google, Microsoft, Apple, like all these companies that have started to lay people off, I see those as the people that are going to go build these companies, right? Because if you really think about what do these people do? Some of them, sure, they're going to go look for another job. A vast majority of them. Some of them, though, are going to take this as an opportunity. And that's where some of this stuff happens, right? Is you have an opportunity, you get laid off, you have more free time on your hands, you want to get back at people, you want to prove people right? Whatever it is, they're going to go get some of this money, go do startups. So I think over the next 4 or 5 years, there's several different avenues. But sports, like I always tell people, there's never been a better time to do this stuff because there's more money than ever. It's global. Everyone's connected now through social media, through TV, through all this, through the internet, through other things. So the impact that you can have, the total addressable market, however you want to quantify it, is larger than it's ever been, and it's going to continue to grow. So I think sports it's a great opportunity to not only raise money to invest, but build things in.
What do you think about things like, like MLS, like some of these smaller investments?
So I invested in PLL, Premier Lacrosse League.
What a great league, by the way.
It's great, yeah. I think the Rabel brothers are special.
Paul is different.
I think they're great. And the thing that I like about that is when I look at the PLL, and I always thought this before, I don't even know if I've ever told them this, maybe I have, but when I looked at them, I was like, fuck, that's exactly how I would do it. I was like, the branding is on point, the way they're communicating with the fans is amazing, the product on field is great. It's growing, right? You can look at the growth numbers both from like a domestic grassroots perspective, like youth is growing, more goals, more players are popping up in different states. TV rights are going to become a thing. Right now, it's relatively small. So, if you want to get on the ground floor, I think some of that is great. MLS is an interesting one to me. I think MLS soccer domestically has seen and will see a bigger growth with the World Cup coming here. I think that's huge. I think that MLS has gotten relatively big quickly, and I think it's interesting because I think it'll continue to grow. But if you look at the business model today, a lot of the way that they've grown is expansion fees, right? They had 10 teams a decade or two ago. Now they have however many teams, and every year someone's paying 150, 200, 300 million dollars. And that's what's driving the revenue. The teams split that money. So that's what's driving the revenue. When that stops, you can't go past 30, 32 teams. We'll see what happens. I think that to keep the valuations that they have and continue to grow, we'll have to see a big jump in viewership. But I think it's all going to grow. I think the thing that scares me is paddleball. You like paddleball?
Paddleball or
pickleball? Pickleball, sorry. Yeah,
with everybody having a pickleball team now?
Yeah. Well, I know why they did it, right? Because
and I've also seen a lot of athletes that get sweat equity for really just attaching their name to it. There's really no.
If people knew how much some of these athletes invested in the team, then I think it would be different. And I think that, right, I don't think it's bad from an ownership perspective. I think that fans see that or consumers see that and they see, oh, LeBron's betting big on pickleball. And it's like, he ain't betting big on pickleball. He's not betting big on pickleball.
Attaching your name to something doesn't mean that you're making a huge investment in the product.
Yeah. And I think, though, if you were to look at the economics of it and you say, okay, a team costs X, I've seen it, how much a team costs relative to the upside, it's a good bet, right? And
what does it cost, by the way?
So I got pitched ownership in a team. This was right after Gary Vee did it, but before the wave of all the athletes, before LeBron, before Kevin, before all these guys. And a team in their league was going for, I think, $500,000.
Oh, okay.
So not bad, right? You get a TV deal, you get tournaments going, whatever, right? And they had the right people behind it. The thing that was always scary to me was the teams were very lean. So they had the same guy that was the GM and the coach. And he was running operations for the team, posting on social media. I'm like,
you can't wear 15 hats.
Yeah, I'm not getting involved in that. But I think they'll make money.
Yeah.
It just how much are they going to make? I don't know. So it'll be interesting.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Congrats on everything.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate you, man.
More to come.
Thank you.